This is it.
This is that one, man. Leveled me.
Come on out of me, come on out of me. Ain't no one set you free. Down in my soul, you're not welcome here. Don't be getting near. All that is dear ain't trying to fill that hole. Used to feel chill of the cold, used to feel it chill my bones. I knew what to do, somehow I knew what to do. I knew how to warm my blood, second nature to mountain mud. I knew what to do, somehow I knew what to do. So come on, come on out of me. Ain't no one set you free. Down in my soul, but all or nothing in between. Some of you know what I mean. More of what was already too much almost always goes away. Women drink, love and time, someone else's dreams, not mine. Both sides against myself and someone always there to blame. So come on out of me, come on out of me. Ain't no one set you free. Down in my soul, babies raising babies now, needed so much more somehow. Wanna try to find my feet and find out, always falling down. Mass perfection, not a chance. Never tried to learn that dance. No excuse and circumstance, so sorry, that's just the way. Come on out of me, come on out of me. Ain't no one set you free. Down in my soul, you're not welcome here. Don't be getting dear. All that is dear ain't trying to fill that hole. Come on out of me, come on out of me. Ain't no one set you free. Down in my soul. Thank you.
Y'all give it one more time for the artist. Go ahead and give him a round of applause. Yeah. The other night, I was sitting with a good friend of mine, and we had one of those moving conversations that I can only describe as moving. It was one of those conversations, but you may know these type of conversations with good friends. They just go on and on and on, and sometimes you think you're about done with the conversation, and then one of you says something interesting, and then you have to discuss that. So we had just finished discussing probably everything from our work lives. He's also a pastor way up north. To the new Marvel series, WandaVision. I don't know if y'all have watched that yet. It's pretty good. I have lots of opinions about it. But during the conversation, he mentioned that he applied for a job that he really wanted. He wanted this new call, and as he was explaining it to me, I could really feel the desire and the want that he had for this job. So I responded like maybe a good pastor responds, and I said, I'll pray about it for you. And he immediately said, thanks. And he goes, I've been praying too, and I've been praying that God's will be done. And that struck me for the first time in a while, and I didn't know why at first. But I guess in Christian circles, it's the politically correct thing to say, right? God's will. It's like you always mention that you've articulated God's will, either first or last. But it almost seems like a check against our desires. My prayer has become too personal. It's too selfish, so God's will be done. Now, it's not a weird thing or a wrong thing for a Christian or a believer to do this, to name God's will. The Lord's Prayer, the model of prayer that Jesus himself gave us, goes like this. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. I guess for me, it's just important that we don't stop there. Because right after those words are, give us this day our daily bread. Now, I've mainly taken this to mean, give us this day, those things that give us life. Those things that provide sustenance for us, that give us a zeal for life, a hope, maybe even an expectation for something to come. And I heard once that prayer, if prayer does anything, it forms you. And so I wonder what it means for a person that whispers words to God, but never gets around to telling God what they actually want. How does that form a person? And then there are also those of us who go out searching for those things that quench our desires without telling God, or anybody for that matter. And to be frank, it's usually those people, the ones that do the latter, that don't say anything to anybody, who are ridiculed most harshly. But I honestly can't conclude which may be worse for a person. Burning with a repressed desire because you don't know how to be forthright with it, or flaming out because you fed your desire the wrong stuff. So John, when I was, you don't have to, we'll talk in a second, but what came to mind when I heard the words, all or nothing in between, some of you know what I mean, more of what was already too much almost always goes away. That's what hit me in that song, that particular song. Because desire may push us to such extremes, it is most always seen as something that leads us astray, something that is either selfish by nature or foolishness in action. And to confess, I think I've lived both extremes. And for me, neither of them have been ultimately rewarding. So C.S. Lewis says it like this, and I want to just read the quote because I tried to actually think about how to summarize what he says, and he just says it way better than I ever could. So I'm going to read it real quick. He says, "Indeed, if we consider the unblushing promises of reward and the staggering nature of our rewards promised in the Gospels, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at sea. We are far too easily pleased." So the essence of the staggering nature that Lewis is talking, of the rewards promised in the Gospels, is to have life, and to have life to the fullest. It's a tricky thing. It's like basking in the sunset. When the relaxation and the pleasure hits you, you know what you're experiencing. You know you're experiencing a good thing. And there is a generosity that swells up in you, a spirit of sharing that enters you. And maybe this is the nature of those life-giving experiences in our lives, the true reward for our desires, the things that genuinely make us feel alive, that move us to love more profoundly, to love more broadly, to love more deeply. So desire, rightly realized, is a flame that is both illuminating and warm, not just to you as an individual, but to everyone around you. Some of us have had the pleasure of being called a friend. Some of us have friends, and there may be nothing more powerful in the world than that moment that you realize you're not alone. It's rooted in a desire for the love that we find in friendship, the joy of trust, of being seen, of mutually giving and receiving to somebody without any expectation. Or maybe some of you have felt the magic of being able to call somebody your person. That's my person. She's mine. I'd do anything for her. It's rooted in a desire to love or to be loved, for a person to delight in our existence, to call our existence good, and then to love us to further existence. Or maybe you have felt the warm embrace of family. It's rooted in a desire to belong, to carry with you a frame of reference so that wherever your feet may carry you, you know where you're from. And I think our world thrives, but not in a good way, on the confusion of desire. There are no shortages of products, items, or experiences that promise or claim to promise that they can fill the very thing that we long for, both publicly and privately. There are no shortages of competing influences that reinforce that all too convenient mindset that life is all about you. It's all about you. And typically our response is to ignore desire and passion completely, becoming lifeless and robotic in the circles that we occupy. Or we pendulum swings, and we feed our desires too much of the wrong stuff, losing sight of what the desire was pointing toward in the first place. Exchanging the ends for cheap imitations, joy for temporary highs, love for meaningless sex, relationship for power. Yet identifying those desires within us is something that ought to be done intentionally and carefully. It's not something that we should shy away from, be dishonest about, or dive into with all our hearts, but with no head. And I think every person here, you can correct me if I'm wrong later, but I think all of us have had more selfish and darker thoughts than, my friends, I really want that job, if we're honest with ourselves. Even now, you may feel a little shame or guilt if I was to ask you the question, what do you really want? And that's okay. That's okay. Because what if the first step in molding our desires in the right way is to simply be honest about them? And if we can't be honest with anybody else, we should at least be able to be honest with God. It's kind of hard to fool that one. And in this process, desire is neither forbidden nor selfish. It's just honest. And standing honestly before God, our desires are molded by the right stuff, because it means that God has a foothold in our lives and in our hearts. And it's in that offering up of ourselves that God has the power to ultimately make those other things come on out of us. So I want to invite you into this storytelling process. Even as y'all have gathered here, you've probably been telling stories about your lives. But I want us to maybe focus in on this song you just heard, Come On Out of Us. The lyrics are on your table. Maybe it's something that I said that struck you here in my story about what struck me about the song. But take a few moments at your table and just talk amongst yourself. What has it meant to you? What are those things maybe that you've been dishonest about? You don't have to get that deep. It's not that type of place. But take a few minutes, and then we'll come back up with the song here in a minute. All right? Go ahead.